had a great deal of patriotism during the World War II that is not evident that often in the United States today. And some of you don't really realize what a great country you really live in, and yet, and so you need to be very careful of the freedoms that we have and to protect those. And so with this, what happened was during World War, there was, at the time that the WWII was organized, the Allies were losing the battle, and they were killing pilots faster than they were being able to train them to go. And so Hap Arnold, who happened to be the commander-in-chief of the Air Corps, was from this because it was a part of the Army at that time, and it later became Army Air Force. And because of that, he asked Jacqueline Cochran if she would come back to the United States. She was over in England, ferrying a plane for them from factory to the pilots at that particular time. And she'd come back and train some women to try to take the place of getting aircraft from the factories to the bases where they were needed, so that they could relieve those men pilots to go into the war. And so that was really the reason that we came into existence. And then I will share with some other others. But then, so I was just out of high school, and at high school we were on rations during World War II, and only two things I can remember was that really we had any problems with. One was sugar, and you only got allotted so much, and you had coupons to go pick it up, and they were allotted by the family, and coffee. And the one thing I remember about the coffee was my mother was the only coffee drinker in our family, and because each of us got coffee coupons, she had enough to share with neighbors and whoever, and so it was one of those things that was fun for her to be able to do. And that sugar cut down on the baking that got done at our house, and my mother was a good baker and baked often, and so those two particular things. And also, I was a senior in high school when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and we immediately canceled our senior trip and went to just a local playground that was there with horseback riding and that sort of thing. And so, of course, gas was rationed, and everything just came on a halt, and the whole nation was just holding its breath so that we could do what we needed to do, and we just mobilized immediately. And it was one of the things one of the Japanese commanders said when they bombed Pearl Harbor, that he was afraid that they had awakened the giant. And that's just exactly what they did. No one realized the strength of the United States, nor the patriotism that the people had in order to defend the country. And so one of the things was I wanted to fly, and I wanted to fly since I can remember. As a little child, I used to, my daddy used to tell me, if you can figure out how, it's really a male-dominated field, but if you can figure out how to do it, just more power to you. And so I always had the support of my family. And so when Jacqueline Cochran put out a call, we had to have 35 flying hours in order to do it. And I asked if I could do that, and my family said if I could figure out a way I could get the 35 hours and do. The other condition was that I go to college, and so I started college and started learning to fly in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and signed up for the WWII and talked to my brother, who was a lieutenant in the Air Force at that time, in the Army Air at that time, into financing it, and for me to pay him back as I got the money to do so. And so that's what happened. Was the first time I went up into the instructor lesson. The first thing the instructor asked me, he said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to take a lesson, or you just want to go out and see how you like it?" And I said, "I know I like it. I just want to take a lesson." So I logged the first few minutes that I was up in the hour, and I loved it as much as I thought I would. Then when I got into the bus, in November of '43, and so that's where we find. And one of the things that we were issued, and that's where I'm going to start on my video, was all of the girls from all over the country flew to Sweetwater, Texas, and a lot of the girls from other states thought they had absolutely come to the end of the world because it's a great deal like Lancaster landscape, except we don't have it doesn't have all of the pretty mountains around surrounding, but it was desert like type thing, and we had lots of wind, and we had lots of things that is just a great deal like we have in Henry Valley, but then they were from more lush green country, and they just thought we had really come to where no man we should be. And so the other thing was, because when we were trying, we were not a member of we were not veterans or part of the Air Force at that time. We were under their rule, under their training, under their orders. The only difference was we were paid by civil service, we could quit and go home. That was the only difference between us and the military ones. We later became veterans because when they started to put women to fly at Colorado Springs, and they said, these are the first women who flew military aircraft, and of course everybody in our outfit just, said, no, that's not really true. So we went to that, and half our son went with us to that for Congress to say, let's make veterans out of them. And we became veterans in 1977. And so that's when we got our, with no benefits. If the girls that died in WASP, there were 38 of them that lost their lives, and they were not sent home. They were not sent with a flag burial. They did not have the honor that everyone else did that was in the military. And so that's always been kind of a source of a point of contention with a lot of the women. And when we arrived on the base, one of the first things that happened to us, and we are at Sweetwater, Texas, is we were in Long Barracks. And so there were 6 of us assigned to a base. This one, Sue Sabat, had gone home because her brother had been killed in the war, and her family wanted her to come, and so she went home. And that's me in the center there, and this was, we were the 5. We happened to be a group who were, all of us were teetotalers, and so we got along fine. And one of the things was, we were the only bay that all 5 of us received our wings. Everybody else had people worked out at the time, and so that we were the ones that did. And so this is us, and the zoot suits were left over, flying suits from the men, so they didn't necessarily fit. You just gathered them up, did whatever they wanted was the ones that they just did. We did not have any uniforms. And the turban was to take care of our hair, so we get it out at the truck board. And there we rode buses out to the auxiliary field to do our flight training. And we was a cattle car, and we just rode the cattle car out. And as you can see, the wings of the Sherman in the background there. And so we got up every morning. We hit flight line at 4:30 in the morning, and you either flew or you had ground school, and then the other flight, and then we reversed that with the other flight. There was a flight 1 and 2 of every class. And so, and on the morning that was, you hit and rode the cattle car before you had your eyes couldn't open. Out to fly, and if you were ground school, then you got up with ground school and went to flying in the afternoon. We preferred the morning flying because the sky was nicer at that time, smoother. And there we flew open cockpit, and then we had hit Texas in November, and we had snow on the ground. You can see, and this was our winter flight suit. The only thing about these was that I could not feel the pedals of the airplane through those boots, and so I always wore swimsuits, and I could froze my feet off. There's me. I happened to have a lady instructor. She later joined the program 2 classes behind me and graduated behind me from the class because she wanted to fly the bigger airplanes. But see, there were 3 lady instructors on our field at that particular time. And this lady's name was Dorothy Swain. She's now Dorothy Swain Lewis. Lives in Idlewild, quite a famous painter. Is just an extraordinary person and still is. And she is, at that time we thought she was ancient. She was a whole 27. And now she still is very active, very sharp, and just really quite a young lady. But anyway, that's she and I playing. And this is 3 of my flying buddies. The girl in the middle works out. We're on the outside, as you can see, that they have on, we all have on boots at that time, so that meant I wasn't flying that day, because I didn't wear them when I was flying. The one in the middle, our instructor always said, if she ever takes an Army check ride after a weekend, which she drank quite a bit, she'll not pass. And so because it fits, you had to take 3 of them, and they fell exactly a week apart. And so sure enough, that's just exactly what happened to her. We were all 3 Swain students. And there's Doc Swain again, very unusual person. In our particular case, of ours, when we flew in the Army, we started out in PT-19, which is a Fairchild, a low-wing job. What happened to me, we were in there was HR will come to us and say, we want to try this program out for the men. And if you can do it, then they don't even fuss at him about it, because he said, well, the women did it. And so then, therefore, it was sort of an easy transition for him for other things, because he found that when he could do this, why it helped him out. And so he came and he said, I want you to go from the PT-17 to the AT-6, which is advanced training, and bypass basic training, trying to shorten the training period for pilots. And so he said, I want to see if that's possible. So we moved after we had soloed the 19, and we moved to the Stearman, took Stearman and went directly to advanced training, which is still my favorite airplane. Okay, that's on the wing of it. The Stearman is a bi-wing job, a very slow thing. If you want to go cross-country in it, it travels at about 65, 70 miles an hour. And so it's not very, very fast as far as cross-country is concerned. Very forgiving airplane, but lots and lots of fun to do acrobatics in. It just will be the most beautiful loop you've ever seen, and it'll just wing over so that you just feel like you're riding on top of the wind. It's just really fun. And there's the icicles off of our barracks. You can tell that they weren't very well insulated, and this is why we had such a tree. Christmas tree was there. The girl that I told you worked out, she was one of my flight instructors, so we were real close buddies. So every time she would get on a bench, she'd come looking for me. And so one day she got there, and she was pretty well under the weather as far as drink was concerned, and I wasn't there. So she took our Christmas tree and dumped it in the waste paper basket. My baymates like to have never forgiven me for it, because they said, because she was my friend. But anyway, there we are again, back at there's another, and it snowed in. This was just kids having lots of fun, actually, even though we were doing lots of work. And this is Starnage, the Russian instructor that was there, and I was glad I didn't have him for an instructor, because if he'd come over the field, he'd stand up in his seat and he would scream at the girls that he was teaching, and he would pick up the crank and hold it in his hand and say, if you cannot understand it in English, I will give it to you in Russian, and then he would let go in Russian as they would fly over, and he was always, all of his students ended up passing, so they always said he was a good instructor, but I'm glad I wasn't the one he was yelling at. This is inside our bay. We had inspection every morning. Our tops had to be made so that the top blankets, they could bounce the quarter off of it, had to be that straight, and each one of us has a single locker, that's the clothes that we have. And this particular one, the girl who's standing had just gotten some roses from a boyfriend, and we were all celebrating her roses, and this is inside. This is where we lived, and so this is where we got, this is where we met Flightline, and everything. We had to march everywhere we went, so we meet a roll call out in front of the barracks, and in the morning at 4:30 we meet roll call to go march to breakfast, and then to the flight line, and I would meet roll call, get back in bed, and miss breakfast. That was more important than just sitting a couple of hours of sleep. And this is Frankie. She was the clown of the group and was always cutting up. This was our instructor. He was teaching us Morse code, and he stuttered. He was one of the most patient and one of the best instructors that we had. But when he introduced himself, we always got real tickled because he said, I stutter, but that doesn't bother me, so don't let it bother you. And he didn't stutter often when he would get started, and sure enough, it didn't bother us, and it certainly didn't bother him. He was just really top-notch. The only thing I can ever remember about Morse code, which was hard to do, and it was the da-da-da, and we had to learn it because that's the way in which that we bracketed beams, and when we flew. Now then, they turn on their transponders. They zero in the direction the airplane is going to go in, and they turn the heading to that particular one. And with us, that was not true. We did not have transponders. We didn't have something on the hill telling us what direction to go in. And so there was a beacon system. And as the beacon sent out 4 beacons across, and it would flash a code in between to tell you where it was, what station it was, whether or not it was a airport, whether you could land at it, or whether it was just on the airway showing you a direction so that you would not get lost. And so they were great huge lights that swung around and that you read. And so that was one of the reasons that we had to learn Morse code. And as I said, it was a very difficult thing for me to pick up all of the dots and the bits. And I could, and he said the dot and the bit, and he said, we always said, you can remember this one easy, it's L. and it means to hell with it, to God with it. And I always remember that one. I thought, wish he had a little cute thing to say for the rest of them, but he didn't have. And so I had trouble with it. And there we are at ground school, and again, greeted by a baby. Wishing well is where every time we came through, and if you can see in the background is the symbol, and I'm wearing a pin of the Campanella, which was the symbol that Walt Disney gave to us, and that's what that is in the back. You can't see it. It was very colorful, and it stood, and you could sit anywhere as you came into the field. And that was at the beginning of the field. This was on the back side of it, and we marched around we were going to class for ground school. We took engines, everything that a pilot would take, and we need to take care of your engine to do so, to be able to take it apart, to be able to get the oil in, to do whatever needed to be done. And this wishing well, the women would, those who would have check rides sometimes would come over and would pay money into the wishing well. So we had one of my baymates was always check rides, just upset her to no end. It would happen regularly. And so she'd wake me up and she'd say, let's go pay the wishing well. So I'd get up and go over with her and I'd tell her all the way over there, this isn't helping one bit, you need to sleep instead of us going out there paying money to the wishing well. But then we always did. Her name was Frances, and we'd go over and pay the wishing well before she had a second life on the next morning. And that we marched and reviewed before each graduating class, or if any officials came to the base and in order to check us out, and we went, and we had brown slacks and our AC jackets, and we wore those as dress, and then marched in class, by class, each one in front of the reviewing stand, and this happens to be our class as we're marching in front of another graduating class. And as you can see, we're out on the airport, and the airplanes are in the background there that we have. This is Mr. Turner, and he was my AP, my advanced trainer. He was from the Royal Air Force, and he physically could not continue to fly for them, and so he flew as an instructor for us, and he was one of the things that, one time when we were flying AC-6s, and we would feel, because the field got played by the number of hours we were in the air. So we flew in some very soupy weather that would not fit for ducks to be off the ground. And one time we had gone in the sky was overcast, very low, and we had flown ground patterns, so I was sick to death of the ground patterns. We can't do much that's fun in an airplane close to the ground because it's too dangerous. And so I called in and asked Mr. Turner if I could go above the clouds. I said, I found a hole and go back. And what he just turned to me, and Alberta, this girl's name that was in the town, Alberta said, Smitty Smith, what they call me, because my last name was Smith at that time. Turner says you can't get lost, so go ahead and go up. So I went up, and then had a beautiful, no plane hardly to watch for who was this one coming, from a long distance. So I had all of this whole space to myself, and I had more fun. I just was having the greatest of time. Then, after I'd flown my hour, I began to look for the hole to get down, and it had closed. And I couldn't find it. And I looked, and I flew first one way and then the other, and it was beginning to get dark. And so I did everything that they had told me to do, and finally decided I was not going to do it, so then I began to look for a place to land. So I got down through the clouds. I had no clue where I was. He said I couldn't get lost, but I was so lost. I didn't even know which direction the field should go in, and I even tried some of our code on the SOS. I did the SOS. I tried to call SOS to the Towers of Alberta, because she would said you can always do that in research. Well, I couldn't get any answer at any time. So finally picked me out of field. Was close to, they told us to find one that was close to air, that had telephone wires close to it, and one that you didn't, declare that you could get in on, and we were supposed to land the AC-6s with the wheels up. I knew if I landed with the wheels up, I would go home the next day because I had damaged an airplane. So I decided I would go in with the wheels down and see if I couldn't take it in. And so I found this field, and I made about 3 passes before I got down, and one of the young men on the farm had gotten up on the windmill to watch to see what I was doing, and he said I almost blew him off every time I passed over. But then anyway, I was pretty close to the ground. And because I was checking to see if it was possible for me to get on the ground without doing any damage. So I got on the ground, walked to the house to call the airport. That's what I was supposed to do, to tell them I was down and I was safe, and then had the gentleman of the house to tell him where we were located. And so they said that to go back and stay with the airplane, that somebody would pick me up. So we went back, and because I was down in the middle of Texas, and the farmers were all around, everybody came to see what the airplane was doing down on the ground, and they brought steak and biscuits, and made a bonfire, and I tied down the airplane. It would have been a beautiful evening if it had not been that I was so worried about, afraid I was going to get washed out. So when they finally came, it was a captain of the Air Force that came after me. And he came after me in a cattle truck, and he checked everything. I had tied the airplane down correctly. I'd covered all the feed-out tubes. I had done everything I was supposed to do. And we rode back home. We got back to the base about 1:30 in the morning, and I got to meet flight line with my parachute. It was probably the most embarrassed I've ever been in my life, before or since, was that just said to the whole base, she got lost and went down, and here she is with a big flight line with my parachute on my back instead of otherwise. And so it was the most embarrassing, but then I was safe, and then they didn't, I asked Mr. Turner what was going to happen, and he said, well, we don't know yet. I'll let you know. And so we continued, and we continued, and we continued, and finally one day I said, I really want to know what they're going to do about this. And he said, well, let me tell you, you did everything that was supposed to be done. You were safe. They hadn't doing anything about it. And then I turned and I said, how long have you known this? And he said, oh, for weeks. And I said, oh, I was so aggravated at him. He said, do you remember when you soloed the AC-6? And we were on an odd runway that day, and he got out, because what he said to me was, it's unsafe for me. And he just pulled out and got out and said, pull aside. And he got out, and I had no clue I was going to go solo that day. And so he got out of the airplane. Well, I was so excited. We had to make 3 landings. Well, if the tower told us to, and he told the tower, and I made 3 landings, came back in, parked the airplane, and realized I left him standing down on the end of the runway. I was supposed to go back and pick him up. And he says, do you remember when you soloed? And I walked all the way across the field, and I of course, went to Big Indian City when we carried parachute in. But then so he said, now we're even. Now we're even. So that was, on the weekends, we rented a place where a bunch of us went up to go race. And this is the girl we call Bird Lake. There was our Easter bonnet. We got to fly that morning, but we were going to celebrate Easter anyway. And this is the instrument pilot, and he was trying to explain to me what I did wrong. You go in and they put you under the hood, and you're supposed to look at your instrument and not feel any senses of the body at all, or react to them, but only to fly by the instrument, which is a very difficult thing to do. And so he was trying to explain, and he said Mrs. Ward was a very good instructor. There we are, back again, marching before the field. And this was my night flyer, the flying instructor. We went back to basics for instruments, as I just showed you. That was back to the BT, the basic training. And then we went back to the lovely AP6, which flies like a dream. And this is Mr. Marsh. And one of the things about Mr. Marsh was he kept telling my instructor about how good I was making night landings. And I said to him, he said, I hear you're really doing real good, Mr. Turner, that to me. And I said, no, when we come in for a landing, I take my feet off of the rudders and the plane just comes down and lands itself. He said, you mean to tell me he's riding the controls? And I said, yes, I don't have control of the airplane at all. So we're making beautiful landings. Mr. Marsh is making them. And he said, well, I'll tell you what you do. When you turn on base legs, pop them. And so the next time we went up, we're practicing landings, we turned on the base lane, and I popped them. And then so the next day, Mr. Turner said, you didn't have to try to triple him. Anyway, there's the AC-6, the favorite of all airplanes. This is Busterfield, Texas, where I was assigned. Was then assigned to an AC-6 to take non-flying officers wherever they needed to go. And one of the assignments I had was to take a newspaper man if he needed to take pictures of Incoming, we had a pilot who was back for R&R from the war, and we took pictures of him. His name was Major Bong. At that time, he was the top aide, and the second section that he went back to was killed. But then during that time, he was R&R. We would fly and get information about him and what he said, and to do those things for the newspaper. And then he'd always send me this little article of when he out of the newspaper and say, this is what we went to get. This is what happened. And so it was a real interesting time. And there is the T-38, what I wanted to fly, what I dreamed of flying, what I did everything under the sun to try to get to fly the T-38. It was a beautiful project. And they're stationed at Fosterville, Texas. This airplane happened to be assigned to Major Bond when he was there. It was silver. Beautiful, beautiful airplane. And I'm sitting in the cockpit drooling. And that's when the other girl was there. She'd come follow me out there, and she'd say, what are you doing? And I said, sitting in the cockpit looking at the flyers that piece of material. I just loved it. It was a great little airplane. And there we are. This was our newspaper man fund. I wore makeup then like I do now, so don't do it. Forget it. First thing you know, I leave, and I think, oh, let's put on some makeup today. And he felt like that we should at least show some, he should have some pictures of us that showed that we were women. So that's where that comes from. There we are walking across at the end of the day, Fosterville, Texas, which is just a beautiful place to be in. And there are three of us in uniform. We were stationed at B-26 school from Fosterville. I went to the B-26 school, which is a medium bomber that they use. We use it for throwing targets, and this is three of us who have been assigned to B-26 school. There's the B-26, the Martin Marauder. An airplane before its day. It landed hot at that time. It was extremely hot for that time. It landed hot. The runways were not long enough, and it was so, they would ground loop it, it would catch on fire, and they called it the Widowmaker, but it was because the airplane, a lot of the men kind of were too proud to go around, and I don't mind going around. I missed the runway and felt it was too short for me to come in. I don't mind going around 2 or 3 times if it's necessary, because then you don't ground loop it. And there we are at Enos Air Force Base. This is the base where we tested the airplanes that had been damaged in some way, and the mechanic would fix them, and when we go up, if they put in a new engine, we got to go up and slow time the engine so it could be flown by the cadets that were on the field in Indian, Oklahoma. And there I am, was 44W4 with my class designation, and there is one of my baymates, who lives in Reno and still very active. Another one of the ones that we just went that we done from the poster. This is a memorial done to us in Sweetwater, Texas, and they also have put up a bronze statue on Sweetwater Field that you saw that I said was in the middle of nowhere that has our names on it very similar, so they tell me, and I've missed both reunions and been back there, and that our names are on there because they felt like we were pioneers, and so they had. So all of our names were there on bronze. And there is, after we got out of the service, after we were disbanded in December 44, got married to Reece, my high school sweetheart, and I'm still married to him, and we've been celebrating 57 years together. So wow. So that is the story.
Wonderful. Flora, would you mind coming up to the front and ask you some questions?
You want? Sure.
You'll be all right?
I have that thing off at school, Sam. Come back here at school.
At this time, does anybody have any questions at all? This would be a good time for that.
There were, in our group, there was historically, there's 1,074 of us that received our wings. And our wings are with the diamonds, and you see the ring with the diamond in it, and that was designed by Jacqueline Hoffman from our wing group. And so that was the ring that was designed for us to distinguish us from the main pilots. I said before, that Reece wings, there was around 2,000 who went into training, so there was about a 50% washout, because about the same as there was in the Belle cadet. That either didn't take the pressure or whatever. Was related to the training. Oh, definitely, definitely. It's just like an extended family, really. We stay in, the whole group over the United States, we have a reunion every 2 years. That's why I said I just want to see what the rest of it was like there. And I didn't get to go. I had reservations. My husband had the other family. He, 2 years ago, became a self-relief with him. And so when things don't go quite well with him, then we just travel. We sometimes we do travel. But we get in touch, and I still, like last night, talked to my bandmate, and I showed you Hazel, the second girl, and then 44 there before. And we just keep in touch with one another very closely. It's a very close-knit group. But then, it was a rough, it was lots of work. It was, I mean, you got up early morning, you late at night, and you had to have, both the ground schools had to be up all day, and the engines, and some of the instructors would get really frustrated with us trying to teach up engines, and he said, well, if you were a bunch of boys, I could tell you, like on a Model T, you know, but he said, being you aren't, I've got to figure out some way to explain this to you, so it was, so, you know, that was part of it. We still had to pass the same test as the boys did for the engines. So.
Was it hard to even hear this?
Actually, for my own experience, sometimes I would get kind of amazed at them always using us to say, you know, you've got to be, one of the things is Jack and Cochran would come and say, you not only have to be good, you have to be better than the best, because you will be watched, you know, and in that realm, it is very difficult, because it means every mistake that you do make is magnified, and so, and everybody knows, you know, you don't make any mistakes and say you broadcast to one another that they didn't tease you about and you got teased about. But other than that, not so. We were really treated quite royally for the most part. Sometimes the girls would be stationed at a base where the commander did not believe women should be flying. Of course, that's why Congress didn't put us in the Air Force at that time. Because they turned it down because we were women, our opinion, that we needed to be home before the Congress stuff. And so, sometimes we get a hold of a person who got to do that way, but for the most part, we were really treated well. And every base I was treated like I was treated, and just treated great. Yes.
What's your contact that you guys learned how to do it? Like, what's your favorite part?
It's been a great deal part of my life. I am a member of the local 99, which is a group of women pilots. And it is, when I go flying, which I'm fixing to do this Saturday, it's like handing me a new lease on life all over again. And it's just like, you know, it's just great. There's not anything quite as interesting or quite as much fun as being in the air. Well, we're going to take the 99 tanks poker run, and what is that they fly to the Tehachapi, Mojave, Cal City, and you in your turn, Roseland, and Fox, and pick up a set of cars. And so we're going to go on Saturday, because we're going to put the box of cars out, which we're going to do to give scholarships to young women who, and we've always had women, and if the women are not available, then we give them to the young men. But then if the women are available, we give them scholarships to them out of college. We have a scholarship of anything in third state that we give you. And this is one of the ways that we make money to do that. And so Saturday we're going to take the cars to the airport. We're not going to the airport. We're going to fly to the Hampton Cal City, Mojave, weather permitting. Otherwise, we just drive them. It takes a lot longer. So to go to Hampton, and here, of course, you just go straight, you know, short stop for flying. When you drive it, right, you have to go this way. So yeah, all the way around, just there. So that makes it different. Yeah.
When you decided you want to be a pilot, did you have any friends in high school or some with you like that be a pilot?
No, mostly I got, that's way far out kind of an attitude. And in fact, the superintendent, it was a small school, I graduated from a town of 5,000, and the superintendent called me in because when they would ask for the teacher, what do you want to be when you grow up, and I would put pilot. And he called me in, and I got a nice long lecture on about how this was not something that a woman should be aspiring to do, that it would not be a field that would be open to. And so I said, fine. He happened to be a friend of my father's. He even went to talk to my father about it. He said, do you know? And he said, yeah, I know. That's what she wants to do. And as I told you, my father said, you can figure out how, more power. So I had no support from my family.
So when you got, when you became a pilot, did you go back home to go?
No, I never have, you know. His name was Mr. T. And I've always thought, I should have gone back and said, well, I made it, but I didn't return to my hometown. So I was Mississippi. So I didn't return there. So I went back to Oklahoma City where I had to call me 11 o'clock. So I didn't go back to Elk City. Graduated high school, Elk City, Oklahoma, which is about halfway between. And I'm real effective in Oklahoma City. I can make a good Midwest when the wind blows, just like it does in Lancaster. And I'm again, I'm a pretty mountain for that. But that's pretty nice. But yeah.
If your family had not have been as supportive as they were, do you think you still would have made it?
The financing of it would have been difficult. I might not have been able to get in my flight time before it was end of the time when they were accepting classes, because I was just 18, and I was working while I was there. I was working in a bakery, and but money just was all up. And finally, I ended up working out at the airport, but then and worked for a lot of time. And I don't know if my instructor was Lloyd Chaplin, and he was reading for us the women fly. And I don't know if he would have helped me to go ahead and get the hours and pay him back, because I do know that he did do a couple of work that way later on. And so he may have been. At least I would have tried to be able to do it. I would have been, if I had to go against the family's wishes with what they're saying, that I was going to say, yes, I did that. But everything in my power to do so. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that they used to is I was rather headstrong as a child. And so that was one of the reasons that they felt like if I could figure out how to do it, they said. Before he was me going, he wanted me to enter he was 18, well, he was over, he had to be 21, and he wasn't 21, but his mother didn't find his papers. And so, with your parents' support, that would be, you have to, if you were underage, you have to have parents sign. And that would have been one hurdle that I don't know how, if that was, but then I got another. I actually got in at 18, I didn't really get to the base till I was 19. Yes.
You told early on that some of the conditions for women in the Air Force or as women pilots were better than male pilots. Is that how was that?
I don't know that that's true. I don't know how. I think women pilots were good, and at the time that they had to be among the best at that particular time in order to make it, because there was much more criticism of it. But like today, I think it's sort of just like cars. You have good men drivers, you have good women drivers, and you have poor men drivers, you have poor women drivers. And I just think it has to be with the individual, and I think that's always true. And I think that's the only way I can look at it, is I just think that some things you're very good at, some things you're not. Anything else?
Do you have any close calls while you were flying? Any close calls?
Other than the landing in the field was the first time. When we were in Waco, when we were stationed at Foster Field, they evacuated our field because the hurricane was coming in, and they were afraid it would destroy the airplanes, and we went to Waco, Texas. And we were given about 10 minutes to airplane and get the airplane off, it's just they just said, emergency call out, and you just dropped whatever you were doing, and went over to an airplane was flying. And we vacated the base in less than 25 minutes, just, every airplane was in the air. And it was, airplanes all over. I mean, when you were flying from Foster Field to Waco, Texas, it was just everywhere you went. And landing, they were landing on several times. And I think that was the closest I ever came to feeling like, you just might have a mishap. You couldn't look enough directions enough time because they were playing above you, playing below you, playing on all sides. There wasn't anywhere to go if you got in trouble. There just simply wasn't anywhere to go. And as it was, and we got to sleep under the airplane, the wing of our airplane, so the emergency was over, so they were free, it was going to come all the way in. And we would have to fly them out from Waco further north still. And so we had to send our airplane because they would bring food out to us. I recommend it for all of you. Learn to fly. It's a great way to go.
Any other questions? How about I do, how often are you $6 how often were you able to $6
You mean when we were up under the wing?
Yes.
Well, we were only there 3 days, and we didn't take showers. And so somebody would come down in the evening to go to the restroom. And so we were there, it was emergency situation. Some of the girls fussed about it, said we didn't even get our toothbrushes. I don't remember. It was fun. We were, playing soft all around you, so you could cut up and play games and do whatever, as long as you stayed close enough to get your airplanes and equipment wood. And so it was fun.
How was it every day really?
You mean after we graduated or on base? The cots were not most comfortable, and the showers were between the rooms. There were 2 showers for every 10-year-old, and I usually took mine in the middle of the night because there was always, I get up after everybody's bed check, and I get up and take salt. I didn't have stuff to fight for it, and the food was really not bad. It was one time to 10 cents, and it served, on a tray, 6 fellows and ways of eating after the night, and that's what we ate. We were hungry, and we were hungry. I would say not bad at all.
So you were never put in the water, like battlefields or never tried to do anything?
Oh, no, women were not allowed out of continuity at that time.
They let you train women and
Fair.
back
Well, the ferrying airplanes was really our main reason. We ended up ferrying, flying targets, and doing utility pilots, just whatever they did for the man pilot. Well, so there was no intention of the airplane in that. I mean, it was bad enough for us to be in the air. Congress was never, ever allowed that.
You want to go into battle?
Never even thought of it. Was not an option, really. And so,
Always fine.
I enjoyed flying. And I don't know for sure how to do any challenge. It was so fun. Just because coming after, even in 238, I really liked the dogs, one of the dogs that was.
So you were able to step away to a
I was okay with that?
No, that was you actually doing something. When you were flying,
Yes.
you stepped away.
So the swing person who would be doing the towing of the target so that he could go into that. That was the basic reason that we were doing. That's what we were doing, was trying to replace people. And by the time I graduated was the time of the field, and that's the reason we were activated by in December of 44, was that we were winning the battle, and then the men were coming home, and there were pilots to take our places, and so they said, we don't need you anymore, pilots. So the men are coming home, we are in dire need now. So that was the reason for the talk. Odlum, who was a big financier with Jackie Hawkins' husband, felt like it was, that they did it in order to get against him because of, he was a big financier, and he felt like that he'd done some things that Congress didn't like, and he felt like that they were getting after him through Jackie, and that's the reason they did. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know.
Do you have any proof?
Yeah, I have 3 children. I've never been able to interest anyone this time. And so, they, that's okay for me. My daughter is the greatest height. I'm on the ladder and half roof, and she just simply doesn't want any part of that. And, it's just something I keep telling her she has wrong with me, but then, but she doesn't, so they don't. Hopefully I'll have, when I taken my grandson out, I have one grandson that was on his 16th birthday. We took it up, look at, they've been, he lives up in Fresno now, and is, weatherman at the station, at Fox Station up there. And, we took him out to see his home out here, and did that, and so whatever, he was there for him. I thought maybe, and every now and then, he does take a lesson or something, so, there, I keep thinking, come on, I've got some great grandchildren, and maybe I can instill a little bit of adventure into their blood and all that, life. Why you didn't play as much fun as it used to be, there's not more regulations, pretty soon, and so, a lot more regulations now, and you have to stay within, and the Air Force takes much more space.
Oh, yeah, I'm better. The old planes, like the one, or the new one.
Well, first things that I only know really about the old planes and then the light planes is that I prefer the old. My very favorite of all time again is an AC-650 horsepower engine put out by Pratt Whitney, and which is an excellent engine there, and it still is fun. Every time I get when I go still, and like a kid, go get in the cockpit, love the wings, think, wouldn't it be fun to go up in this thing again? And so, it's just fun.
Are you allowed to fly this thing?
Am I allowed to fly them now? If I had the chance and money, when you do 650, it burns gasoline like hell. It's not so much so tomorrow, and so it's very expensive to fly. And so that makes a difference. And I've never been in a jet to fly, except in an airline. I've never really.
What can you fly nowadays?
152. Cessna 152. What they call puddle jumpers. But it's still dead slow, and it's a good safe airplane. And then, of course, when we learned to fly, you had to be able to spin the airplane. A lot of the airplanes you can't spin now because it's, you get dangerous. We had to be able to, when we got our license, to be able to tell. When you get into a spin, you had to tell them what heading you were going in and what heading you would come out of it. So you had to know what it was coming up to do. I think they lost something when they took that out. Of them knowing something about the air, because that's usually a pilot who can spin an airplane. How do you know, how you have the feeling, what happens when you totally lose all flight buoyancy, and this is going to fall, and it gives you that sense of knowing, and so to me that helps where that danger zone is. So, but then that's what these FAA regulations say, none of it, and that's where they do spin them, but not, but it isn't part of the administration. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.